dive into a world of untold narratives with the podcast that explores the unseen quadrant of the Jahari window of our lives. Here, we uncover the hidden stories and unspoken truths of extraordinary individuals, revealing what others don't know about us, but what we know about ourselves. This is The Bottom Left Pane. Hey guys, and welcome to a new episode of The Bottom Left Pane, where we dive into the lives of extraordinary individuals, revealing the lesser known sides of their stories. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Simon Guerard, a man whose life is a blend of scientific intellect and extreme physical endurance. In this episode, we'll explore how Simon balances his demanding scientific career with the physical and mental challenges of running 100-mile races almost every month. Join us as we uncover the story of a man who pushes the boundaries of what's possible, both in the lab and on the trails. All right, well, welcome, Simon. Honestly, it's a pleasure to have you. I've been so excited to have this interview. Honestly, can we just go ahead and jump into it and, tell me a little bit about who you are, what you do, and just kind of where you come from?
Sure, absolutely. And I think we're going to talk a lot about running, but sometimes I like to say a few things about my non-running life because it does exist a little bit on this side. So I'm Simon. I'm a French Canadian, which explained the little je ne sais quoi in my English. I'm a scientist by training, work in life science, but also an avid trail runner. My happy place is in the mountain. That's how I met my wife. That's how we found our happy place together. And now I'm a YouTuber doing ultra marathon, running 100-mile race pretty much every month, having fun doing it and trying to share it with others so that people can get into the sport. And trying to break some myth about the sport also in general.
Okay, nice. So, let's kind of just jump into it and say, what inspired you to embark on the journey of ultramarathon running? And can you share the moment when you decided to take on your first ultra race?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'm more of a hiker and someone that loves the outdoor than an ultra runner. I think what makes the sport beautiful is that there's a lot of different backgrounds. Some people will do that to push themselves, to see if they're capable of doing it. There's definitely a midlife crisis kind of vibe for certain people. For me, that was not it. I've always been an avid hiker and just slowly getting into the process of, okay, I'm doing 15 mile. Okay, I could do 15 mile in a day. And then you do 20 and then you're still hiking. And then 25. Oh, maybe I should run when it's downhill too. And that just turned into doing maybe 35 miles a day, which technically would be an ultra marathon. It's more than 50K. And not even knowing that ultra marathon were a thing. And then eventually I kind of found out about that. And it was just a great way to be able to see a lot of things. But and that's how it started. But the way I was hooked was more the people and the community. It's a very, very supportive community. People are helping each other. It doesn't really feel like you're competing against each other, but more we're all working on ourselves. We're setting ourselves ambitious goal, and the guy or the girl next to you running is someone that you want to help achieve their goal because they're going to help you. And that's really what hooked me. So I would say how do we say that? Like the gateway drug or whatever it was, the beautiful mountain. And then the addictive part was the community and the people.
Okay, yeah. So actually, I kind of want to dive into it a little bit, right? So the community, it sounds like it's known for its camaraderie. So how has being a part of the community impact your journey, and can you also share a memorable experience of support or encouragement from your fellow runners?
Yeah, I think there's almost contradiction in ultra running, and I've had that discussion with many people where you want to be by yourself on trails. You want to experience that for yourself. This is your own personal journey. This is your own personal growth. And as such, it is an individual sport. But at the same time, it's really not. And it's hard to express it in words until you actually live it. But I think that if you go there and you only do things by yourself, you're having half of the experience, which is a significant part. But that's something that you could do by yourself. That's something that I could go this weekend and go on trail and run, 30 mile, 35 mile, no problem. But on race day, it's a little different. You could do the same thing by yourself than you do on a race, but you wouldn't have the people. So I think it's an integral part of it. And the experience can be what you want it to be. You don't have to be social. You don't have to be silly, but you can be. And nobody will ever judge you one way or the other. And I think that's something that is very freeing. The way I would behave at work and the way I would behave on trail is very different. I think people at work would be a little surprised of how I am on trail, how silly I can be. And vice versa. Maybe people on trail would say, wow, like this guy is actually working seriously when he's working. He's getting things done. And I don't think that's necessarily a contradiction, but yes, I think that's an integral part of the experience is the community, and how you start by trying to work on yourself and be all you can be. And at one point, I think there's a switch in your head that you realize that part of growing is helping other grow. And I think that that is something that we're all helping each other. And sure, I make videos about how to run, but it's a two-way street. People have helped me and I help people. I think one of my first race experience that, wow, I was so happy to not be by myself. It was in the middle of the night. It was pretty cold. It was a trail that was difficult to follow in the desert. So with just the skylight, it would be hard to know what's a trail and what's just walking in a random direction towards a cliff. And my main headlamp died. So I switched the batteries. Oh no, the lamp was actually dead, not the batteries. Okay, it's okay. I have a backup battery. And then it stopped working. And then I was in the middle of nowhere. And then someone just came and they could have just run by and do their things. But they said, you know what, like, let's walk together. Let's walk together to the next aid station. And obviously they must have lost 30 minutes to an hour doing that. Mm-hmm. But what's the option is to leave that guy in the middle of the desert by himself in a cold night, right, or walk a little bit. And then afterwards, he had an extra headlamp in his drop bag. So at aid station, we have some equipment. And he just gave it to me, and I've never seen him again. I was never able to repay the favor directly to him, but I have helped other people, and I think that's something that is important. He gave part of his race to me, and he saved my race, which I think is very beautiful. The kindness of stranger, especially. I don't want to be too philosophical, but I think there's a lot of bad things happening in the world in general, and sometimes it's easy to become very negative about how selfish or cruel some people can be, and seeing that kindness gives you a little bit of faith in humanity and helps you be more positive. Like I don't want to be part of the problem. I want to be part of the solution, and these little things matter. Obviously, like a headlamp I think is a big deal, but usually it's much smaller than that. It's just the race experience that you experience, the experience that you will have in a race and that others will have depend on each other. If everyone is a dick around you, then you'll have a terrible experience. Right. So maybe don't be a dick yourself to other people around you, and everyone will just have a better day. And if we could just agree to that, like, let's just all be nice. Let's just all smile. Let's just all say thank you. Like, the little things actually matter, and it adds up very quickly. So.
Yeah, I love that. Like, yeah, I'm very curious to. I'm not a runner, but now you kind of get me into like excited and wanting to just go visit the community. So let's kind of tie it back a little bit back to, you're talking about going through this situation where now you're in like, everything's pitch black and you don't have your lamp and stuff, right? So obviously this is pushing beyond like your physical limits and your mental limits. So can you describe a race or experience that truly tested your endurance and just kind of like your mental strength and how you managed to push through that challenging moment?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would even start by saying, I think I have one race in like my 100-mile out of 33, one out of 33 that I would say that went very well. And like, I actually shit myself. So I'm saying it went well, but I literally shit myself. And that's a good race. It's impossible to run that kind of distance, even 50K or anything like that. You will hit the wall at some point, and I think that's part of the adventure. And running is just one way to do that, but there's so many other ways to do that. Like, if you're not into running, that's totally fine. There's other things, but you will hit the wall, and then you really have to ask yourself, like, am I doing this? Like, am I committed to doing this? Or that's it. I'm going home. Yeah, I had my fun. It was fun running with people, and right now I'm in pain. I'm struggling, and there's really no point in continuing. And I think that's a personal decision. I tend to be very stubborn, and I say no. Like I'm doing that. But yeah, a specific example. I think one of my most challenging and easy to explain experience was actually mountain biking. That's
Mm.
also on my channel. And I'm not a mountain biker, and I'm someone who's kind of scared about injuries to some extent. So mountain biking is a great way to get injured. And it was my main mountain biking race of the year. I was super nervous about it. It's 12 hours, and 2 hours in, I crashed pretty hard. And I thought while I was flying in the air, I was already thinking, this is it. Like I'm not finishing this, and I'm like not gonna be able to run for a while. Then I landed, then I broke a rib, and like I was kind of banged up a little bit, and there was definitely a moment in my head where I was like, all right, like I guess I'm done for the day. But I go back to thinking about why am I here anyway? And did I really start the race thinking it would be easy? No. And now I'm facing something that is difficult, and it's not an excuse to stop, but it's more, well, I guess this is what we came for. I guess I came here to test my limit, and I guess right now this is the limit of physically. I have a broken rib. I didn't know it was broken, but I knew something was not
Right.
normal.
Yeah.
And I have 10 hours ahead of me of I need to use my lung a lot. I need to breathe a lot. And a broken rib, for anyone who's had that, like they know that's extremely painful as an injury. And you're going to be in pain for 10 hours, and you could just quit. Like nobody would think any less of me for quitting after crashing my bike. Like that would be a very normal thing to do. But I said I would do it. I said I would push myself, and then I just did it. Yeah, I don't think there's necessarily magic trick. I think there's a lot of mind trick that you need to develop, and that you will develop running long distance. It's physical at first, and eventually it's not. Eventually, your body is destroyed, and the more fit you are, the later that will happen.
Mhm.
But that will not happen if you run 100 miles. That will not happen at mile 99. Like that will happen at mile 20, 40, regardless of if you're very fit.
Right.
Professional is another story. Like they're not human, but normal people, they will struggle very early, and then that's where it becomes mental. Of well, I can still make one step, so at least let's do that one step. And well, I'm between two aid stations in the middle of the forest. I should at least reach the aid station. Like I shouldn't decide I'm quitting now. Let's
Hmm.
wait and go there. And can I make one more step? And there's little tricks like that. I think finding purpose helps, and I think that's true for any aspect of anyone's life. Like I work really hard at work, and part of that is we're making medicine for like rare disease patient children. I think that there's a strong purpose there. So if I work late at night, I mean, I could say, oh, well, fuck it, I work 9 to 5, but I think there's a purpose to that. Just like running, I think there's a purpose on working on yourself and being all you can be. That will help me push a little bit further. I think things like humor are helpful. I think camaraderie is helpful. Just talking with someone, and that's part of it. If we're in the middle of the night and we're talking to each other, we're gonna go further than if we're isolated.
Right.
So, yeah, little things like that.
Yeah. So actually, on that, right? Like you sound like, I mean, like this mindset, like is kind of solid in you now, right? Like this stubbornness that you call it. So did you always have that, or was that something that kind of came about after, an event or something? Like how did that come to you?
I think my wife would say that I've always been very stubborn. I would agree with her. No, it's interesting. I think it's easy to isolate things in your life and think like this is my running, this is my work, this is school or whatever, my personal life. And you by running so much, you will develop things that could help in other aspects of your life, and vice versa. I think some other aspect of my life has helped tremendously. Just kind of getting seamlessly into running, and one of them is, yes, I've always been stubborn. Is the funny way to say it, but I think the nicer way to say it is if we were in a work interview, I would say I'm goal oriented and I'm a problem solver.
Right.
And like the way to phrase it is, well, I said I would run 100 mile, and sure, I don't have a headlamp right now in the dark, or I'm leaving a trace behind me, number two. Okay, like let's find a solution, because what is not an option is to not do what I said I would do. I'll find a way to get there, and that has been true for my PhD. That has been true at work. That has been true in my personal life. Difficulty is not an excuse to not do what I said I would do. It's just something that you need to overcome. And if you have that mindset in your personal life, that will help in running or any endeavor, the gym or anything like that. The problem solving instead of quitting mindset is very helpful. And I say that, but at the same time, just to be clear, I totally understand and have quit myself on certain occasion, understanding what's a futile effort, what is impossible, and what is possible, what can be solved. And I think understanding that is also a part that is pretty important. The cost sometimes of continuing. I think for running, the obvious one is not pushing past injuries. For me, that would totally defeat the purpose. Running is decently, injury-prone sport, and pushing through an injury is just not the smart thing to do. So you need to understand when to pull the plug.
Okay, so I mean, you sound like you're kind of, I kind of mentioned earlier that you're bionic, right? Like you're kind of going 100 all the time. So balancing the demands of ultramarathon training with everyday life, that sounds like it might be an issue, right? So how do you strike a balance between your passion for ultra running and your personal and professional commitments?
Yeah, I mean I think that's a great question. I think one of the reasons I can ultra run is because I've always been pretty busy. People that have been busy for a very long time tend to be good at time management. The thing is that everyone thinks they're busy all the time, which is always funny. And I'm sure we all have that experience of you see someone being, oh, I'm busy, like I can't do this, or like, I can't meet up for whatever, like, I have too many things. And you look at what they actually do and you realize that they don't do that much because there's a lot of time wasted. So number one is to be a little bit more organized and conscious of the value of time. I think time is probably one of the most valuable things that we all own and not necessarily realize. There's the obvious, health is pretty important, but time too. And anytime you spend, an hour doing something, that's an hour you could be doing something else. And there's definitely some time burner that are easy to just cut. And one that people say often, and I'm like, this is the stupidest thing you've ever said, is like, oh, you can sleep like 3 or 4 hours a night. I was like, dude, you're fucking stupid. Like, I'm gonna sleep. Like, I need my sleep.
Right.
But there's other things. I was like, well, why are you scrolling so long, like on Instagram? I mean, it's normal to do it. I mean, obviously there are smart people doing something addictive, so it is addictive, like not judging, but like clearly maybe you could be running instead of scrolling for 30 minutes, and maybe at the end of the day you would feel better about yourself if you had done that. But yeah, so it's time management, understanding the value of time, therefore not wasting it. And then the other one is definitely understanding priorities. Because running is important for me, but quite frankly, it's not that high. It's probably the highest is probably family, I would say. I don't have kids, which is like the secret weapon I have right now to be able to run so much, by the way. Like I say a lot of things, but like I don't have kids. If I had, it would be very different. So like I understand everyone with kids. I know that you see what I do and say, how can you travel so much? I'm like, I don't have kids. That's the one solution. But yeah, so family, so my wife and everything, and my relationship to the people very close to me, then friendship similarly, then probably it's work, then it's running, and then it would be my YouTube channel. And I think someone that knows me very well would actually be able to notice when I'm getting really busy, because say like I don't upload on YouTube, for example, and then all of a sudden you can go on my Strava where all the runs are logged, and all of a sudden like I'm cutting on my runs a little bit. There's two reasons why I would cut on my run. One would be if I'm injured, but the other one is just because I'm way too busy with work. the funny thing is I didn't go there at the beginning, but one of the reason I start ultra running beyond just like it kind of was a natural evolution from hiking was that I was extremely busy at work before, extremely busy. The type of like you're working until 1 to 3 in the morning, and then you're up at 8 and traveling for work. That was not
Oh wow.
pleasant.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was something that was temporary. I knew it. Everyone knew it, but it was not great, and that was for 2 years. And it really felt like okay, like there's really not much to life right now other than work, and I need something else. And for sure, at least for me, working out is kind of a guilt-free pleasure. Um, if I spend 1 hour watching TV and I'm super busy, and I go to bed like 1 hour later, I'll feel super bad about it
Uh-huh.
because like that was kind of silly. But doing that is I can't feel bad about working on myself. Now, sure, if I would go on a 4 hour run, I would say maybe that was not needed, but reserving a little bit of time for my well being mentally and physically uh, was kind of needed. And I think it's similar people procrastinating. I remember I was not like that, but some of my friends when I was in college, their guilt free thing during exam period is cleaning the house
Yeah, I can see
because
that.
you can't feel bad about vacuuming. You did something good, you did a chore, but at the same time, that's a way to just disconnect. Well, for me, it's running. I can't feel bad about going on a run. Like I'm working on myself. Are you kidding? But obviously, I did that so that I could disconnect, and that was very helpful. In finding ways to prioritize and not be lazy about it, for sure.
Okay. You talk about, maintaining your health, especially when you're doing all of this, right? So, running these races, it's puts immense strain on your body. How do you approach not only just recovery, but also like nutrition to ensure that you stay physically and mentally resilient throughout, your training and your races?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's very true. And I'm for those that have never seen my YouTube channel, I try to be as transparent as possible. I see a lot of people that have big ego and will say things like injuries don't exist, and like I absolutely have dealt with minor injuries, and it's about first being smart and recognizing when something is wrong. So it's best to say, well, okay, something's happening to my ankle or something's happening to my knee. I'm gonna first, instead of making it worse and ignoring it, I'm gonna dial it down, and that's really the step one is to understand you're in recovery phase right now. But even doing that, like I do have to be careful and mindful, and that will mean doing some PT by myself, strengthening exercise. Again, it's more
Hmm.
prevention than treating. Then
Right.
after a race, I do take the time to. Usually, it's about a week where I won't really be running much. I think active recovery is great. So not running just for me just means like maybe I will jog, maybe I will go for a 1 or 2 mile, very slow jog or walk just to get my muscle activated a little bit and have some blood flow and just the ligaments and everything just stretching a little bit. I think is helpful, but not putting actual real strain on them. I think active recovery is super important. Then in terms of nutrition, I'm not the best at it. Um, I think that's something that in theory I could work on, but it has worked pretty well. And I think part of it is trying to not be too restrictive about it.
Hmm.
Not necessarily eating junk food, but not necessarily being too careful. And I have good faith in biology and that natural evolution have taught our kind of body to crave food that we need to some extent.
Hmm.
I know it's kind of miswired sometimes, and we'll crave like high energy food just because back in the days we didn't have high energy food. But for running, that's not so much an issue that you would have too many calories.
Right.
But say I feel like I really want something fatty or salty or sugary. Like I feel that my body is telling me, hey, Simon, we need that right now. Have it. And then I won't be counting calories or anything like that. And then it's little things. I don't buy into things like ice bath, but I do ice. Like if I have tendonitis, I will do that.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay, cool. So can you actually walk us through a little bit about like your training regimen and like, how do you prepare for one of these races?
sure, absolutely. And I think there's the theoretical. and then there's the practical, and they're not the same. Um, and also one huge complication. So I'll talk more in the past than in the present, because I'm racing every month or sometimes even every 3 weeks. At some point, there's just no time to train specifically for a race anymore. If
Right.
I race, then I have 1 week I'm just healing, then maybe 1 week of training, then 1 week of taper. That's not actual training. That's more maintaining. So let's not talk about like that, but more
Mhm.
when I was training for my first 100 mile. I think it really helps a lot to have an actual training schedule and to write it down. Um, I strongly believe that like this is more of a template, this is more of a guidance, and just to your real life circumstance. Like unless you have the best schedule in the universe and your life is extremely predictable and therefore extremely boring, it's hard to stick to it. But at least you have some guidance. Like I said, I would run 20 miles Saturday. I can't because I don't know. I need my car to be fixed or something. I was the whole
Right.
thing. Well, I knew that I had 20 miles, so maybe I moved that to Sunday, and then you adjust. But writing down that schedule is pretty important. And then the way it looks, and I have done a video on my YouTube channel for anyone who's getting into running long distance. If they want like the super specific on how to run your first 50K, I walk you through how to go through that. But for me, when I was at my peak for that, it was a range of about 70 miles a week, um, running probably 6 days a week. So I tried to have a day of rest, and typically that meant a lot of mileage in the weekend. So about maybe 20 miles Saturday, 20 miles Sunday, mostly for practical reason, but also just physically, it's good to have these back-to-back long runs. But I work Monday through Friday, and because I don't have kids, the weekends are definitely more free. So that's a good time to go for like a 3 hour run. In terms of hours, I probably in training run at an average of 7 mile an hour. So that's about 10 hour of pure running. But you
Right.
need to add to this things like strengthening session. So I try to do that to prevent injury. It's about 2 sessions of 30 minutes a week. And then sometimes it's cross training, some cycling or some swimming, just to get goings and adjusting based on how I feel. Like if I feel pretty banged up from my running, I might switch a 3 hour long run to a 3 hour session on the indoor cycling, the indoor bicycle. So yeah, so I think all in all, it's probably like 12 hours a week at peak, 12, 13 hours a week, which is a lot. Like that's average 2 hours a day. And finding that time is difficult, but
Right.
there's definitely some tricks like I'll bike to work, and or back in the days, it was easier for me to run to work also. And if it's 4 miles in the morning, 4 mile in the evening, that's 8 miles. We had a shower at work, then you're good. You're good for the day. If you go into the more specific and you're really able to have a good plan, it's good to have like some slow miles and some fast miles. So having like some interval or these sorts of things really help in terms of performance. I tend to not do it so much lately, mostly because of injury prevention, but for performance and increasing like cardiovascular is super helpful.
Okay. I want to cut back to, you're talking about how you're really into nature and how that's really what kind of got you into this, right? So, how has the experience of running in diverse, like natural environments, influenced your connection with nature, right? And do you have a particular race or trail that holds, a special place in your heart?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I think I don't know if it changed my connection to nature because I was already pretty connected, but it definitely changed my connection to the US. So,
Hmm.
I'm from Canada, I'm from Montreal, and I lived in Switzerland and Sweden before coming to the US. And then I was mostly living in Cambridge and knowing the Northeast. But ultra running has brought me to a very different climate in the US. And that really has helped me see the wide breadth of landscape that there is. I kind of knew it, from movies. Like you see places like in the desert in like Western movies, and like you see
Right.
the Montanas and these things. But actually being there is very special, and that also helps connect with different community in different places that behave a little differently. So just the traveling part of it is very interesting. My favorite race tend to be mountain race in Colorado or Utah. I like the high mountains in general. So one that the views were absolutely gorgeous and the course was absolutely crazy is called Uray 100, which is in the southwest in In Colorado, it's some of the tallest mountain in the U.S. and some most beautiful scenery. But there's also a race close to Zion that I very much enjoy, and that's the thing. Like the landscape is totally different. One is more kind of desertic and red rocks and cacti, and the other one is above tree line, snowy mountaintop, um, steep cliff, and yeah,
Mhm.
it's the breadth of it is what interests me a lot, and that's very often how I choose a race is based on that. I feel like, oh, I'm due for a desert race. Okay, let's book a desert race. Oh, I'm due for the mountain. Let's book a
Mhm.
mountain race.
Nice. It sounds like also like a great way to just kind of get the chance to experience to travel. But a question I had was, so you're kind of facing all these different terrains, right? So then how do you prepare for that when it comes?
Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't put that in my kind of preparation, but that's a big part of it. For sure, it's good to run on what you're gonna run, but it's also impossible if you for those who have lived in Boston or Cambridge, if you need to run a mountain race, that's not a good
Yeah.
place to train for that. What I was doing was I was straight up going to, and it's funny, sometimes I do look at my old training schedule. Um, I was going at the stadium and I was just working up and down the bench of the football stadium
Oh
because
wow.
that was the biggest hill you could find in Cambridge, really. And that was cool. That was a good workout. That was good hill repeat. But there's definitely climate is one thing, and then technicality of trail is another. So running on road, a road is a road. I could close my eyes and probably run on the road until I would kind of hit a car. But the, you don't need to watch your footing so much. Whereas on trail, sometimes it's like that, but sometimes you really have to be good about knowing where to land, and that's something that is hard to teach but easy to practice. And the more you do it, the more you're comfortable and the less likely you fall. So practicing that and being comfortable on trail is a big part of it. Now, because I come from a more trail running and hiking background, that's something that I already had. But for people that are not used to that, that's a little bit trickier. And then the
Right.
climate, yeah. So I raced Badwater 135, which is a famous race in Dead Valley. Dead Valley is so named because like there's nothing living there, and that's because it's pretty hot. Um, when we were there, it was 127 at some point, so like
Oh wow.
above 50 Celsius for Pamis all there. I adapted to the Fahrenheit, so I'm good. But yeah, it's really hot, and 120 is really hot, but 127, like you feel the difference. And how do you prepare for that? I mean, it's not a sustainable, livable temperature, and even less so if you're running, but
You're
you
not
can
running in an
train for
oven?
it. So, yeah, I mean, it's that's how it felt when you open, an oven and like the air comes in your face. That's how it
Oh
felt
man.
when the wind was picking up. You're so used to the wind being associated to cold because it's bringing fresh air, but in this case, it's bringing air that is even hotter than you. So it really felt like oof, like you feel it, and then especially you have the paved. It's a paved road, so if the wind is in the wrong direction, it picks up the air that was getting warmer because of the dark paved road, and it
Right.
goes on you, and you really feel it. You go to the sauna, you do some training session. That's the best way to train for heat, and it doesn't take so long. Like in 1 week of sauna session, I visibly saw the difference in terms of sweating. I sweat so much now. It's like disgusting, but that's what you need to do in these climates, especially in a place like that valley. It's so dry that you don't even notice that you're sweating, but you are sweating an insane amount. Um, and then the flip side of that would be mountain race. Sometimes it's below freezing, sometimes it's hailing, sometimes it's very windy on these mountaintop, and you have to know that comes also more from experience from hiking. Like, what's the minimal amount of gear that you can have and
Yeah.
be able to do it? Because you can't carry everything. But if you needed a windbreaker and you don't have it and you're climbing a mountain, yeah, it can be actually kind of dangerous, and like some people will actually drop race from that. Especially the one that I really loved is pretty famous for having really bad weather. I was lucky, but usually it's really really sketchy weather. Also, when you're at like 13,000 feet, huge huge storm. You don't see anything. It's hard to navigate. Rocks are slippery. You're getting
Right.
cold because it's in the mountain. It's easier to warm up when you're like on a road and you can just run and activate your body. But when you're on a cliff and it's getting rained and it's slippery, you can't run anymore. You can barely move. That can get very sketchy very quickly. So experience is what really helps here. Knowing what to do, knowing little things like before the night I will change my shirt to a dry one because otherwise I'm going to be cold all night, even if I put layers. And knowing these little things and preparing for them, like the race logistic, is part of experience. That is difficult to master, but that one at least is easy to explain. And I try always to be vocal in my own like kind of recap, like saying like what I'm doing, so that people can think, oh, like he brought in extra layers because he's worried about the cold. Maybe I should do the same thing. So experience helps for that.
Yeah, man. Honestly, that's very. I mean, from my opinion, it's very inspiring because I mean, I can't imagine having to go through something like that.
I'm a mountain man. Like that's definitely part of why it came so seamlessly for me. Is ever since I've been a kid, like that's what we would do. My grandfather used to be. I don't know the name in English, but essentially like he would go way up north where there were no trail or nothing, and he was the guy kind of marking terrain and like
Oh, like
doing the
paving the
map
trail.
and things like that. Yeah,
Oh,
so
wow.
like not necessarily an explorer, like things were already like known, but kind of putting markers. So he would go out there, and that means that when we would spend time together in summer, that's like kind of what we did. The typical winter holiday break, what we would do as like the bigger extended families, we would have a cabin like way up north in Quebec in the big snow. And hey, the kids would just like we take some snowshoes and we're just gonna go wherever. There's no
Just
trail,
adventure.
there's nothing, but like we're gonna go 1 mile in that direction and then we're gonna come back and try not to die. And nobody died, so that's good. But you become very resourceful, and you get I think a level of respect for the wilderness. Nobody's gonna fucking save you sometimes, and little things can have like huge consequence. And you look like at national park, people get in trouble all the time in like silly plays. I was like, but what were you thinking? But that's the thing, they were not thinking and didn't have the proper respect, kind of used to civilization a little bit more. Whereas obviously,
Right.
I'm civilized, I'm used to civilization, but I know like the switch of like, well, I'm not in civilization anymore. Like little things, just like I don't have anything to carry water with me, could be a big deal.
Right.
So it comes from experience, for sure.
So on that, I'm kind of curious. Before you got into all of this, would you say you have any inspiring figure that kind of made you want to jump into not only just not only just ultramarathon running, but at this point, like you sounded like this big wilderness man, right? Like it sounds like your grandfather, right, was kind of a big inspiration. But maybe anybody else that's out there.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a good point. Like my two grandfathers were definitely figures that I respected highly, in their own right, and they both had like pretty gnarly experience in the wilderness. So him was doing that. The other one, I think, was more working like on construction side, but more like remote construction side. And like he was in
Mm.
a helicopter crash and like had to survive for a while. And yeah, like the kind of thing I was like, wait, why is there no movie? I guess it's more common than I realize, especially back in the days. And especially the reason they crashed, my understanding, is just some mistake they did in the navigation, and they just went in the
Yeah.
wrong direction.
Uh-huh.
And then they just flew until, well, we don't have gas anymore. So it was not like catastrophic crash. It was more like, well, I guess we're crashing now. And like, that's what it was. So they're a pretty big one. I found a lot of inspiration on YouTube as I was getting into ultra running, which is definitely partly why I'm making movies myself, trying to show what the sport can be. I think some YouTuber like resonate more with me than others, and some movies resonate way more with me than others. And like trying myself to put kind of my drop there. I think one that I really like is a movie called How to Run 100 Mile, I think, was the name. But it's a pretty generic name, but it's a very big one, like millions of views. It's Brendan Leonard. It's two friends racing together. One of the races that I actually did in Colorado, Run Rabbit Run. And just the dynamic between the two, I felt was very interesting. And it went a lot into all the preparation that goes before the race. Because it's hard to run 100 mile or any ultra marathon, but what is really, really hard is to be prepared to run 100 mile. The actual doing it is more of an acute kind of pain. It's more, a band-aid. You want to remove it right away. It felt a little bit more like that. Like, yeah, it's going to hurt a little bit, but like you can get it out of the way. But the months and months of dedication to it, to the process, the setbacks that you're facing, that's very difficult. We talk a lot about mental toughness during the race to not give up. But yeah, 30 hours is a long time to be suffering.
Okay.
But 6 months to a year of maybe, especially if you have a family and you have to go wake up at 4 a.m. to go running, that is a different kind of mental toughness and resilience that I think is very impressive. And seeing those average guy doing it was something that resonated with me much more than seeing professionals. Maybe because I put them on a pedestal, but professional, what they do is unbelievable. And the more you know about the sport, the more when you see what professionals do, you're like, what? Like, that is like, for someone who's never run 100 mile, me saying I ran 100 mile is impressive. I understand that. Like, I'm not stupid. And sometimes like the typical question is, how long does it take you? Well, my fastest was 16 hours. And then based on the reaction, if someone has any clue or not, which is totally fine. But some people will say 16 hours. Wow, you ran for that long. I was like, you're not an ultra runner. If someone hears that and is an ultra runner, more likely they will say, oh, that's fast.
Yeah.
Like, that's a good pace. It's like, yes, that's a very good pace. I've never come close to repeating that. I don't know what happened. But pros, they do it like the best of the best. Like for a flat one is like 11 or 12 hours.
No way.
Yeah. I cannot do a 10K at that pace. It's ridiculous. I'm more likely to be twice as slow as them, and I'm not the bad runner. And when you see them on some of the race, on some of the course, one of the race I did recently with my wife, she did 100K, so I was very happy for her. It's a loop 20 mile, and some really good runner are there, and they do a loop way faster than you, and you see them pass, and it's hard to believe that, wait, they've done 20 more miles than me already. Like, I'm at mile 30 and they've done 50.
Yeah.
I don't understand how it's possible. And because of that, then it's kind of removed from me. But seeing the average guy with a normal life doing these things makes it more approachable. It doesn't make it any less impressive. I think we all face different challenges, just like Tamage. That's a huge one. But yeah, that's kind of more the vibe that has inspired me. And I think it's reflected in my channel, trying to like convey that.
Yeah, I mean, first off, like, I totally see where you're coming from. Like, I think it's so important for us to hear the stories, right? Like, somebody needs to go first in order for somebody else to go next, and to really understand, hey, like, I can do this just because we are in similar circumstances. So let's kind of come back. I wanted to touch up too, like, on your work, right? And like on what you do for a career, because you sound like you were very passionate about that as well, especially too when you put it like up there above ultra marathon running in your priority list, right? So can you talk to me a little bit about that and like how you got into that?
Yeah, I mean, if I sign a sponsorship for my channel and like I grow, I don't know, maybe I'm gonna change. That's definitely not gonna happen. But and especially the purpose of my work, I think is pretty interesting. But I think part of the reason that it's above is at the end of the day, we do need money to live.
Right.
That's like, I can't just go running. That's a hobby. That's something I enjoy doing. And actually, I don't think I would want to have that my full-time job. I think that would be terrible. I think that would take the joy out of just, I race whatever the fuck I want. And if I don't want to do it, I'm not doing it. And there's zero pressure. If I run, a race next month and I don't feel like making a movie about it, whatever, like my boss is still gonna pay me, and that's good enough. Yeah. So what I do is I I did a lot of things, although always in the same field. So I used to be a pharmacist working with patient at like the equivalent of a CVS. So like working with patient, helping people with their health. But I was always more of a like, I think that shocks people that know me more for my running and silliness, but I'm way more of an intellectual than a sporty guy for sure. Like I'm not a
Hmm.
physical guy at all. And I felt that the job of a pharmacist was interesting because you get to interact with people and help people. Like you help that one person in front of you a hell of a lot. But on the broader scope of society, it felt like you're a drop in the ocean. And like it's a like every drop matters. So absolutely not reducing that. But I
Right.
felt like, hey, I want to do something that is a little bit broader. It's instead of doing something big for one person, I want to do something small for a lot of people. And that led me more towards science. So I was doing research in immunology, working mostly on arthritis and inflammatory bowel disease. So
Mm. Mm.
I was straight up in the lab. I was straight up like reading a lot of paper, thinking a lot about understanding these things and how could we improve people's health. And I love that. But that felt like a huge puzzle that we're trying to resolve. And I absolutely love my time as a scientist, both as a PhD, but also working in a company. And I transitioned a little bit out of that. I did some consulting for a little bit, management consulting, just to get the business side. And now I'm more in between. I still work in the life science field. We still do medicine, particularly for a lot of pediatric disease, neurology.
Hmm.
We do other disease, but that's one of the big ones for sure. And my role is I'm kind of the bridge between my company, which is a mid-sized company, to a larger company. That
Mm.
we have all different things that we're good at in terms of the landscape of how these things work. And my company, I think, is extremely good at early science and early clinical work, and we're able and good at doing other things. But I think our specialty and what we're known for are these earlier things. And a larger company could have more capabilities when it comes to manufacturing a product, commercializing it, talking with physician, having a sales force, and these sorts of
Right.
things,
Right.
which is not our specialty. So basically, what I do is I go around and say, hey, like our scientists, because I'm not a scientist anymore. I'm a scientist in my heart, but I'm not an actual researcher. Is hey, our scientists did something really cool. Should we work together on this? And that sounds like a salesman's job. It is to a little bit, but what I love about it is much more that what you're trying to do is create a collaboration
Right.
and
Yeah.
like a win-win scenario where you're good at something, we're good at something. Let's work together and let's bring that medicine to patient. And that's kind of the focus. Is a good idea is great, but you need also to execute. And there's a huge gap, and I think every step along the way is important. Um, and I'm finding ways, finding solution. That comes back to me being a problem solver, finding solution to get this good idea that our scientists have and get that to patient to help them. And yeah, I miss my research day a little bit, but I think the purpose is very good.
Hmm.
The purpose is definitely very positive, and very passionate about that. And obviously, like that's the kind of work that can be very busy at times.
Right.
But patient are waiting for that sometimes. Some of the, especially the ultra rare diseases that we have, there's literally no treatment or no good treatment. So if it takes 6 more months, um, yeah, there's direct consequence to that. The consequence that you don't see as directly as when I was a pharmacist, like you have the person in front of you, but conceptually, you know that those 6 months matter. Every day
You're right to
matters.
someone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on that, I'm kind of curious to see in throughout your history, like, what are some big impacts that you've noticed you've been able to contribute to in, like in in the improvement of medicine?
Oh, I think my role has been very small, but because it impacts a lot of people, and that's a difference. It's hard to explain it. It's like I haven't done any major discovery, but yeah, I have my paper out there with my name, and like this is like I discovered something new. Is it something that will change the world? No. Is it something that a lot of people care about? Also, no. Is it something that like could indirectly lead other scientists to new discovery, which eventually could lead to something big? Yeah, that could be. I don't think so, but that could be, and that's the difficulty of pure science and research, is that it's almost impossible that you have a direct impact on patient. Like saying like,
Right.
hey, I have this cool idea, and then eventually you see that as a medicine. Like if that happened, usually you win a Nobel Prize. Like you're an exceptionally, like that's unrealistic as like me running 100 mile in 11 hours. Like I know that's not gonna happen. Some people do it, and that's fantastic, but the bulk of people don't.
Right.
But what we're doing is we're all putting a brick into the wall, and we're kind of building something bigger. And is
Right.
my
Yeah.
brick a special brick? Honestly, it's not a special brick, but my brick is there, and like that's a contribution. You don't know, collectively we don't know which project will actually be meaningful, because I think I was a decent scientist. I don't think I was the best of the best, but I think I was a decent scientist. So yeah, so that would be my contribution. It was a, I mean, we could go into super nerdy detail, but I don't think anyone wants to hear that. I mean, and it's been a long time, but like I'm a T cell guy. Like if you have any knowledge by any chance, like, hi, T cell's the best, B cell, man, I don't know. But that's okay.
All
That's
right. Well,
okay.
I appreciate all of that. So, ultra marathons, kind of coming back to that now, right? It offers a unique insight on like personal growth and resilience. Do you have any key life lessons or philosophies you've taken away from running experiences? How they've impacted your lives?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I like, and I'm definitely not the one that created that, but you can do more than you think you can. That is something that I think is very important. It doesn't mean everything is possible. Like I do think there's a roof to the limit of what is feasible, but most of the time we sell ourselves short. We
Mm.
think we would not be able to do something. We have some self doubt, and the risk of that is that you don't try, you don't put in the work to see, well, can I do it? So understanding that you can do more, I think is pretty important to actually achieve your full potential, because then you'll put in the work and you'll have a drive.
Mm. Nice. Okay. And this will be like the last official question, but you've achieved remarkable feats, in ultra marathon running. So what advice could you give to those who are just starting their journey and aspire to like push their own limits, whether it's in running or other aspects of their life? Like what would you tell somebody if you were in that How to Run a 100-mile movie, right?
Yeah, it's, I think, take it one step at a time and enjoy the process and trust the process. It's something that takes time. It's something that is complicated, and if you take your time and you enjoy it, you will actually get there. And you need to trust that you will get there, but you won't always see progress directly. But you can look back 1 year later and see, where am I today? And you'll see the progress, and that will be very motivating. But if you're looking for shortcuts, if something that just pisses me off, there's not many things that pisses me off, but it's those clickbaity things like, do this trick, 5-minute tips, and then you're gonna be a faster runner. And it's like, hey, if you're looking for a shortcut, I don't think you have the right mindset for ultra running or trail running. The secret is that there is no secret. The secret is that if you're looking for an easy solution, yeah, that's not a real
It's not for
solution.
you.
That's what we call a scam. Like that's a get rich kind of scam, but in running it's a get fast quick kind of scam. Like that's not a thing.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thanks. So I kind of told you before, at the end of every episode, I like to ask just a random question, just for anybody. And so today's question for you is, how would you describe yourself in 3 words?
Oh my God. I already said 3. If I had made a bad joke, I would have said "Made in America." But I think that's very political, and some people would say that's actually 2 words, and that gets extremely political there. No, 3 words. Shit, sorry. I think I'm passionate, hardworking, but lazy,
Mm. Yeah,
which
I
is
love
4
that.
words, but yeah.
No, that's fine. That's more than enough. But honestly, Simon, thank you so much for today in the interview.
Yeah, thanks for
Looking
having me.
forward to hearing more. And then actually, last thing, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find my adventure and some running tips on Running with Simon on YouTube and on Instagram. I'm mostly a YouTube guy because I think there's a lot of information to be shared that just doesn't convey well in the short kind of picture type of
Right.
Instagram. But yeah, YouTube, Running with Simon.
Awesome, Simon. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to The Bottom Left Pane. If you enjoyed our journey into the unseen stories today, don't forget to follow us on social media at Bottom Left Pane on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. You can subscribe to our show on any platform where you get your podcasts to ensure you never miss an episode. And if you're interested in supporting the production of our show, consider checking out our Patreon. Even a contribution as little as $1 a month can make a huge difference. Thank you for your support and for joining us in uncovering the hidden chapters of life. And remember, sometimes the most profound stories are the ones we've never heard before.